Our first question for tonight goes, Dear Ajahn, what is a Brahma God and what do their minds look like? Thank you.
What does anyone's mind look like? Mind is invisible. The easiest way, if you want to know what a Brahma God looks like, go to some of those beautiful temples in Bangkok, which have those beautiful Ubosita halls with all the paintings on the wall, and sometimes you'll see painted Brahma gods. And so the traditional Thai and probably Southeast Asian artists' artwork, the Brahma God has a nice, all the decorative kind of frills of their clothing look kind of like, a bit like, kings and queens and noblemen, noble women of olden times with all kinds of decorative clothing and crown or headdress. That's the traditional way they say a Brahma God appears. If you see a vision of one, how what we'd say their subtle body would appear like that. But they also say a Brahma God can appear just as a ball of light, golden ball of light, for example. Could be another color as well, but just a ball of radiant light, as you would imagine, like a star just sitting there floating in space. Different ways that Brahma gods manifest, and of course there's things we arupa Brahma gods, the formless Brahma gods, because all these Brahma gods, their life, their existence is based on the attainment of jhanas. So maybe previously they were human beings, attained the formal jhanas or the formless jhanas, reborn as a Brahma god. So Brahma gods in the formless realm don't have a form. So that's probably a good way to start. And nowadays you can Google everything. So Google artwork about Brahma gods and you'll get to see those traditional representations based on those cultures and the perceptions of the people in those cultures. So maybe a Brahma god in one culture might look, in terms of the way they appear, a bit different. But on the level of what we call sabhava Dhamma, there's the basic nature of the mind. There'll be something common to any Brahma god, the purity of mind. There's a great purity of mind. It's not as pure as Nibbana, obviously, but a great purity of mind based on the development of the states of jhana. So bright, radiant minds. So you definitely know if a Brahma god turned up at in your meditation retreat or class or your local temple or whatever. Brahma god is going to bring a lot of radiant, positive energy with them. But I'm not sure they would turn up very easily. No need. They're enjoying the bliss of their Brahma realm. But if they did, they'd bring all this radiant energy and fill the place with the good, positive energy for a while. Knowing most Brahma gods, I would say they probably would turn up at midnight or 1 a.m. They don't like to turn up in the middle of the day. They'll turn up late at night when most people are asleep. So I think most people miss Brahma gods, to be honest. But if you meditate a lot, maybe you're up and your mind is very bright at night, maybe you'll see or notice a Brahma god. And people do. Devatas, celestial beings, are probably more common for practitioners to encounter, but occasionally Brahma gods as well. So radiant bodies, radiant subtle bodies, radiant minds. If you want to look at a Brahma god or get an idea of a Brahma god, look at a flame of a candle or look at an electric light and you'll get a little bit of an idea.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. When I hear people planning to do something unskillful, but I don't try to say anything or stop them, in such a case, do I contribute to their bad karma too?
Well, you would only contribute to the bad karma if you egg them on, or you even mentally just wish them to do whatever the unskillful thing is they're planning. Yeah, you might. It's the opposite of anumodana, isn't it? Like when people do good, even if you don't talk to them or get involved, you can just quietly know that they're doing good and wish them well and appreciate the good that they're doing. But similarly, if people are doing evil and you mentally agree, you might say, oh, yeah, I hope they do that. I hope they go and get him, or I hope they go and do this, do that, with a mind of greed or anger maybe. Then you're mentally supportive of that unskillful action. So there's a little bit of negative karma there. So you have to work against that. You know, in say any kind of conflict, you might take sides. You have to be careful not to give in to your anger, your jealousy, or selfishness. But if you're more equanimous and mindful and you're just aware of something but you're not mentally or verbally supportive of it, then there's no bad karma made. And it depends on the situation, doesn't it? Like sometimes, you know, like you see the news and you see two sides fighting in a war, there's nothing you can do, so you just have to practice equanimity. And you don't necessarily have to take either side. You just go, this war is sad, war is destructive, what a terrible thing. But you're not wishing for either side to win. I guess you might have the wish for them both to stop fighting and have peace. So you practice a lot of equanimity living in the world, and sometimes it may just be two people disputing next to you, arguing next to you. Maybe there's not much you can do at that moment. You can still wish them well and you wish that they stop arguing, but it depends on the situation, doesn't it? Right? What do they say? Like, you know, two dogs fighting, you go and try and separate them and they'll both turn on you. And sometimes people behave more like dogs and they're fighting or arguing, and if you go and jump in too quickly or get involved, maybe they'll come back on you because they're wild in that moment, they're so angry, so upset, maybe they'll turn on you. So each situation requires sort of careful consideration. Sometimes you just have to be equanimous and wait until they calm down, cool down maybe. Other times maybe there is something you can do. It just depends on the situation.
Sadhu Lumpur. Another question. Dear Lumpur, I find it quite difficult to practice metta towards my parents, as I have a difficult relationship with them. I do try to recollect that they gave birth to me and develop gratitude for the upbringing they have provided with limited success. What would Lumpur's recommendation be when it comes to parents?
Well, keep going in that same direction. You're on the right track there. You have to remember, when you practice metta, your aim is not to necessarily like everything about somebody. It's simply to have that basic attitude of goodwill and wishing them well. So I assume if you have a difficult relationship with your parents, there'll be things you disagree on, different outlook, attitude, different way of viewing the world and life and so on. So then, you have to ask yourself, you want your relationship to improve, maybe you want your parents to change in some way. Okay, what is that change going to come from? Is it going to come from goodwill and a genuine wish for improvement coming from you? Or is it going to come from hatred, anger? That doesn't lead to good outcomes. It only makes things worse, doesn't it? You have to see through that, get to that point, and then sometimes you have to have a lot of equanimity with parents because they're your parents, like you say. They've done all this, bringing you into the world and brought you up. Even if you don't like the things they say and do, don't agree, Just maintain as much equanimity as you can. And then also see what you can do to give something back. And just do it because it's the right thing to do. But it doesn't mean to say you have to agree with everything they say and do. You may be aware your parents are still ordinary human beings. They make mistakes. They follow their defilements as you do. So you're aware of that, but you don't have to make a big deal out of it. You accept them with metta the way they are because they're so important to you, because they gave birth to you. Thing is, if we don't understand this point and we harbor lots of grudges towards our parents, it just becomes a real obstructive kind of karma in life, in our personal relations, our own meditation, in our work, in everything you do. The more strongly you hold grudges against the parents who did bring you into the world, brought you up, it leads to a lot of obstacles, a lack of success, all kinds of blockages, you might say, in many aspects of your life. Similarly, when you realize this point and you clear up your grudges, meaning you accept they're different than you, but you don't want to bear a grudge, you don't want to hurt them, don't want to argue with them. When you realize that, things open up. Your life will improve for sure. So try and get that basic principle established, even if your parents have been badly behaved in some aspects of their life. Try not to stick with the anguish and the judging, but just forgive, let go and move on, and even see what you can do to give something back or help them.
Sadhu. Next question. Can one person radiate metta to a person? Does the process of radiating work or not?
Well, it does. If there's a real mind state of metta, first of all, it radiates to you as a person, doesn't it? Your thoughts, your feelings, your emotional state improves when you consciously cultivate metta. There's no doubt about that, and you can prove that for yourself right now if you want, by bringing up metta. That's the starting point. How effective it will be with other people, well, that depends how well you practice it and how well you cultivate it. Particularly if you do develop meditation regularly and you learn to develop the quality of metta in your meditation, you might find it can be quite powerful in developing good relations with other people, because it affects the way you think, then the way you talk, the way you act. It will come out, sometimes in more invisible ways, sometimes in obvious ways. So if you talk kindly to someone, then usually they appreciate that. If you do things for other people, they usually appreciate that. There's the obvious ways that metta will affect the people around us, and then there's the more subtle, invisible ways, which if you become skilled in your meditation, you may be aware of the level of your mind, how much you can affect others. So you also have to be realistic and not expect that, if I just spread metta, the whole world is going to change and improve. And it doesn't always work as easy as that. It may take a bit of effort and practice. But having said that, sometimes people get very good success when they practice directing metta to other beings. People where it works best usually is someone you already have some kind of relationship with. So family member, old friend, someone you've been associating with for a long time. You spread metta to them, often it will lead to some good results quite quickly. They may feel it, you may feel it. If the relationship has not been going well, it may improve quite quickly. If it's a stranger, it can still work, but it may be just a little bit more challenging because there's no basis for the relationship. Of course, if it's somebody, I tend to talk about monks because I'm a monk and I know monks. If it's a monk with strong metta, maybe to the level of jhana, like a Brahma, well, then even strangers can feel it. They feel the metta, they sense it, they warm to it. It's a quality that people will warm to. So if you're developing a lot of metta, somebody else will warm to that. And so maybe it's somebody who's angry, they may calm down. Somebody else who's very sad and upset, and they may feel more peaceful. Someone who's very agitated and worried, they may calm down. So, over and over again, you see that, whether it's, my own practice or the people I live with or teachers I know. You see it on a daily basis, basically. When people practice metta and in a meditative way, the metta has a certain energy to it. It helps. People calm down, people feel better for it, feel happier because of this effect. But the one receiving the metta doesn't always realize, because maybe they don't meditate, maybe they're not very sensitive to their own mind. They don't realize what's going on, perhaps. So it's a more unconscious reaction. The same with animals, isn't it? You can practice metta to animals, and I don't just mean pet animals, which will love you anyway because you feed them every day. I mean, animals out in the forest or wherever. You practice metta to them, often they respond to that. Even animals that can be quite aggressive normally can calm down. So, Ajahn Chah is famous for taming a king cobra. Who was it? Lumpur Lui was a famous monk considered to be an arahant. He taught a tiger who came to watch him walking meditation. He taught the tiger to walk meditation. Sounds unrealistic, doesn't it? But having been in the forest, practiced metta and met tigers, I can say, yeah, you can do that. You can train a tiger to calm down and get it walking back and forth, which he did. Trouble was, the tiger got so addicted to his metta, because metta can be quite an addictive quality if it's well practiced. The tiger didn't want to leave him. So the tiger spent all night just walking up and down next to Lumpur Lui. In the end, Lumpur Lui had to kick him out. He said, look, you've got to go off into the forest, do your thing. Don't stay here. And the tiger sort of sadly had to go off into the night. So that's one of the drawbacks of metta as well. It becomes addictive for the one on the receiving end. So sometimes they don't really want to leave the source of the metta. If it's metta on the level of a Brahma god, it's like, I just like to sit here all day basking in the metta. Someone with jhana, you don't want to leave them. So sometimes the one with the metta also has, out of metta, but metta with wisdom, you might say, they have to push the person away to get them to go and do more good things rather than just sit there clinging to them.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. Dear Lumpur, in the chanting, there is a mention of Lord of Death. Is this a metaphor or a deva being?
Both. Just the idea of death, you need to develop some goodwill and a positive attitude because it's part of life, isn't it? Everyone dies. So might as well develop a good attitude towards it. And the onset of death, the signs of death approaching, develop a positive attitude rather than going to fear or aversion. But then there's also the devata, who's the Lord of Death, a being. They say there are these beings, and there's probably more than one of them, a lot of people to look after in the world, but the Lord of Death is kind of overseeing, escorting people to where they need to go according to their karma. So, some people go up, some go down. Lord of Death sort of keeps everything ticking over. But, I can be a bit flippant talking about this, but sometimes it's like, there's still room for uncertainty there. Sometimes one or two monks I know have had a close brush with death, you might call it a near-death experience. They've died and met devas escorting them to their next life, the heaven realm or wherever. but then they don't die. They come back to life again. It's like, oh, no, not your time. Okay, we're going to send you back. I guess a bit like, getting on the wrong train or something, and the guard says, okay, we'll let you off here. You go back to your starting point. So there are these beings that move between the realms of heaven and hell and earth realms and ghost realms and escort people around, and people can get too attached to it all, of course, and love to write stories and legends about the whole thing, so be a bit careful. But to deny it also, I would say be careful of that also. Because maybe some people have actually met these beings and know they do exist.
Sarunbo. Next question. Dear Luang Por, consciousness is one of the 5 aggregates. Is consciousness the same as mind? When we have defilements, is it our mind or consciousness that is defiled? When we practice pure awareness, what do we try to be aware of, the mind or consciousness? Do we also let go of the consciousness or mind?
Probably just for practical purposes, you could say the same thing. It's the quality that knows. As a human being, you can know things, can't you? Consciousness knows through the eyes, the ears, tongue, smell, touch, and then the mind itself thinks and knows things and remembers things. But it's this quality of knowing, as opposed to material things, the physical form or the physical world around us that doesn't know. It's not conscious, doesn't know. Mountains, bricks, TV screens don't know. They're just material objects, inanimate objects. Whereas living, breathing creatures, small and big, have consciousness. They have a mind and they know. But trouble is they know wrongly, or they have an unenlightened, defiled mind. So that's the important part of the whole thing. When you know wrongly, the untrained, undeveloped mind will create sense of self, craving and attachment, attached to all kinds of things, including itself and the mental activity going on, the thoughts, the feelings, the memories, as self. That's where all the trouble starts. That's where suffering comes from. What you call the pure awareness, well, maybe that's the mind that is trained in the qualities of the Noble Eightfold Path, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, mindfulness, insight, training itself. So mind is training itself, or consciousness is training itself. Because people always say, well, who is conscious, who is the mind, etc. It's just the mind is just the mind, this quality that knows, and then training it with the Noble Eightfold Path to the point where the delusion of self and clinging to that idea fades, because it is a delusion, and so it's seen through, abandoned. So they say then, the Arahant, the one who has completely purified their mind of all clinging to the idea of self, in anything, any form, physical or mental. They've reached Nibbana, but they can still be alive. So like the Arahant is still alive, they still see, hear, taste, touch, smell, they still have consciousness, they still have a mind, but there's no sense of self arising anymore, so then there's no more karma being made. The Arahant still eats, but they're not making karma when they eat food, they're just eating as a function of being a human being and there's food available, so they eat. But there's no attachment, no craving, no karma being made. All the actions of an Arahant are, we say, giriya. They're just behavior of an Arahant living their life. They're not going to hurt anyone or harm anyone, but they're not creating good or bad karma anymore because there's no more self. So there's still consciousness there going on, but there's no one who owns that consciousness. The sense of ownership is gone. So when the Arahant dies, there's no more rebirth. There's no more rebirth consciousness. For the unenlightened being, when they die, there is rebirth consciousness, and all the sort of karma and the attachment goes into the next life. For the Arahant, that doesn't take place. So then there's just Nibbana, and the body dies. But that doesn't mean to say mind has disappeared or died. It's just there's no longer a self-owning mind. So no more rebirth. We call that the unconditioned or deathless.
Sadhu. Next question. Dear Ajahn, how do we maintain and strengthen our upekkha and metta during difficult situations? For example, when we are subject to harsh speech and very unskillful actions from another person, what should we practically do in this situation, internally, in our mind, and externally, our response to the situation? Also, is there a specific practice to strengthen equanimity? Thank you.
Well, mindfulness directly leads to equanimity of mind. It's sort of synonymous. So the more mindful you are, the more equanimous you'll be, and the more ability to maintain equanimity in different situations you have. With mindfulness, your speech, your actions will be more restrained. Mentally, you can understand things better, you can make wise choices when you're mindful. And that means also you can maintain your equanimity under pressure or in the face of difficult people, difficult situations. But exactly what you should do in each situation is hard to predict, isn't it? You can't just do it that way and kind of work out everything ahead of time and have a plan. So you have to go back to mindfulness to maintain equanimity, keep developing that, and you're preparing yourself for whatever comes along. So one important thing is to keep learning from your experience. As you're trying to maintain equanimity, develop mindfulness, you're learning things like, what are the supportive conditions for upekkha or equanimity? Well, in the beginning, a lot of patience will help. Being patient with that which is difficult to endure, such as the harsh words of other people. So if you keep the attitude, I'm learning, I'm one in learning, because that's how the Buddha encouraged us to see things, even painful situations, harsh words, difficulties, you can learn from. So you still get something from those things, those situations. What you get is, now I know what it's like to have somebody being very aggressive or bullying me or being very rude to me. Now I know that. Now I know how to contemplate this, or this is something I can understand now because I've just had to go through it. So if you keep that attitude of learning from your experience with mindfulness, even the bad stuff can be turned into something useful. You might say that's one of the miracles of Dhamma. You can learn from everything. Everything is teaching us, even unpleasant experiences that you don't really want, but if it happens, we'll learn from it rather than just become kind of stuck in it, a victim, suffering, dwelling on it, why me, why did this happen? You just try and learn and then grow from it, move on maybe. So keep the attitude of learning and establishing mindfulness over and over again, patience, and then developing some wise reflection on the things that happen to you, the situations you experience. These will allow you to gain something even from the worst experience. Like someone today said, their car got broken into, they lost their phone. Nowadays your whole life is stored in your phone, isn't it? It's got everything, your bank account, your records and healthcare and all the stuff of your life, your contacts, everything is in there. So when your car is stolen, your phone is stolen with it. it's pretty shocking, because it's like you've lost everything, and then suddenly your life is exposed to another person who may not wish you well. They just want to, steal from you or whatever. That's a real shock. So I said, well, okay, at the very least, you now know what it feels like when your car and your phone is stolen. It's not much of a consolation, and I'm not trying to say, okay, everything's all right now. But at least you now know what it's like. When you lose everything, in that sense, you lose everything, okay, you know what it's like. You don't die, it was just the phone, just the car. So you know that much, even though it's a terrible shock and it's very inconvenient and troublesome, but it's not the end of your life, it's not the end of everything, it's just something you have to go through. So you can gain equanimity that way, don't you? You reflect on it and go, okay, this has happened, but now I'll just deal with it. Another one is, we have this sense, equanimity is understanding karma. So when bad things happen, that's karma, isn't it? You have to accept. Your car gets stolen, your phone gets stolen. It's not what you want, but it happens, and maybe there's reasons for that have led up to that. Maybe last life you were doing the same and it's come back to you. Because this is where understanding and accepting, that we don't live just one life, helps with unexpected surprise situations, good and bad, that seem to come out of the blue. Maybe the causes lie in the past and you can't remember them, but in the case of bad karma, like losing a phone, a car, it's like paying off a debt, isn't it? Maybe there's causes, you've harmed others in the past, stealing their stuff, it's come back to you, that debt is over, hopefully you won't have to pay that debt off again this life, end of it. And you can even wish for that in your thinking from this place of equanimity and understanding good and bad karma, and it gives its result. You say, may this karma now end, and may there be no further hostilities between myself and whoever it is in the past I've hurt and harmed. If I've stolen anything from anyone in the past, well, may there be an end to that karma. May those people I've hurt by stealing from them, may they be well. May this karma be ended. Something like that. You can think it through. So you're ending a debt, and then you can feel happy. Oh, that's the end of that. Paid that debt off. As Luang Por Liam once said, when the cement mixer at Wat Pah Pong was stolen during the meal, it's the one time the monks are not around, so they're eating their meal. Someone outside picked up the monastery cement mixer, put it in their truck, and drove off with it. And someone came in and said, Luang Por, they've stolen your cement mixer. Luang Por said, good, they're helping to tidy up the monastery for us. Meaning he kept his equanimity even in the face of a very annoying, disturbing thing.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. When experiencing a painful feeling like sadness, and observing that this is a painful feeling and this is what sadness feels like, is it useful to stay with the feeling, to try and understand where it came from, how it started, or is it better to acknowledge it and let it go with the same equanimous observation?
Well, number one is always try to establish mindfulness. That's why a regular meditation practice helps for when you have to meet with painful feelings, sad situations and so on. Have a way that you can establish mindfulness, bring your attention back to the present moment, using the breath, using other meditation objects, could be using the object of metta. Because when you're mindful, equanimity is being nourished and it's beginning then. The more continuous your mindfulness, the more continuous the equanimity. And with the equanimity you can think things through better because you're not being pulled around by your emotions. So when you say there's a sad feeling, well, yeah, you establish mindfulness, it feels like this. Maybe it's a very strong feeling that you can't just dump from your experience in that moment. You have to be with this. But there's a difference between knowing a sad feeling with mindfulness and wisely reflecting on it and indulging it. That's the important thing. Like when your mindfulness is not very strong, we tend to indulge our emotions. Positive emotions, pleasure, happiness, excitement, and the more negative ones, such as sadness. Indulgence means you cling on to it, you dwell on it, and then it leads on to mental proliferation, and oh, I'm so sad, why me, why has this happened? As if you indulge something, your mindfulness is going downhill, your insight and wise reflection is disappearing, and you tend to identify with it, and then you suffer more. So this is the value of trying to establish mindfulness. Maybe at first it's very difficult, of course. If you're very sad, you might have to be just very patient and use some wisdom as well. You remind yourself, okay, this has come up, maybe, like you're saying, you know where it's come from, something's happened perhaps. So you know why it's there, but you still have to deal with this feeling. But try to remind yourself, be patient, reflect on it, don't let it lead you into unskillful behavior maybe. So on the level of precepts, I feel really sad, but don't go off and do things that make it worse or harm yourself. Oh, I feel sad, and then you go off and get drunk to drown your sorrows. You even have that saying, because it'll only make things worse. If you're feeling sad, best is try to establish mindfulness, reflect, accept what's happened, but not make it worse, not indulge it.
Sadhu. Another question. Dear Luang Por, what are the steps to achieve a rebirth in a Deva realm?
Cultivate hiriotapa, sense of shame, fear of the consequences of wrongdoing, unskillful actions. Be kind, generous, keep cultivating those qualities. Try to undertake to keep the 5 precepts on a daily basis. Make merit in different ways. Listen to the Dhamma, meditate, help people, do all these good things that we teach you every day. And if you haven't yet attained Nibbana by the end of your life, maybe you'll be reborn in a heaven realm. So just keep practicing. Don't give up the practice.
Sadhu. We have more of a suggestion rather than a question here. So someone here is asking, perhaps next time Luang Por could talk to us about the difference between consciousness that has something as its object and is a conditioned state, and the consciousness that is without surface. Viññāni dasanang. I would love to request a talk on this.
Okay, I'll see what I can do. As long as there's a TV screen that's the surface, we'll be able to beam the Zoom talk to you next time. Somebody's written, the sound and visual is perfect, no issue. Well, that's good. Perhaps that was in response to me losing my visuals. But yeah, consciousness is like that. Consciousness is always looking for an object, something to settle on, whether it's mental object or physical object. Of course, the mind of Nibbana is not settling anywhere. It doesn't own anything, it doesn't have anything, doesn't want anything, doesn't need anything. That's different than the ordinary human consciousness. The unenlightened consciousness is always looking for objects and grasping things. But yes, next time we'll maybe talk a bit more about that. So is that it for tonight?
Yes, it is.
So it's probably enough for tonight. Nice talking to you all. We wish you well on this rainy Sunday night here in Melbourne or outside of Melbourne, and hope to see you again next time.